How do you interpret what Kohberger is doing right now? The complaining. He's constantly in the news.
The other inmates don't much like Bryan Kohberger because the other inmates have decided to team up on a 24-hour attack of noise.
Solitary confinement is torture. It causes such severe mental damage.
I think the argument has to be if he's in the general population of the prison, he's going to be killed.
He needs to be protected from others, and others need to be protected from him.
Families don't care about this guy. People would hate you for having compassion for someone that viciously killed 4 young adults.
Do we want to make of him more of a monster than he already was?
His level of arrogance, he doesn't talk much. He was always the smartest guy in the room.
What screwed up the perfect crime for him?
It's a good question, and it's the question that I put to the chief because it's the one everybody wants to know. He was looking to buy another knife. He used a VPN. They had actually spotted him. Chief told me this.
You think the FBI and Idaho State Police knew something they could have given the heads up?
There's been some books written and stuff that claim that the FBI... My understanding is that they got some real gangs going there. Guards don't run a prison. The guards are there to keep the prisoners in. That's the misconception that everybody has.
Bryan Kohberger is behind bars, but now the story is the prison. The killer is complaining about everything. The food, the fellow cons, the isolation. It might be getting into his mind right now at a level that he would never, ever imagine. Today, we are going inside the mind of one of America's most notorious killers. He's been in the headlines. We know what a horrible person he is, but today we're going to learn how horrible the conditions just might be for him inside that prison. The guilt, the fear, the isolation. And with us today, 2 titans. NYPD legend Paul Mauro. You see him on Fox News. He is a legend, one of the top experts in law enforcement in the media today. And our other guest is the top prison psych expert, Dr. Terry Kupers. This guy is the OG. He's a living legend. He is the #1 authority when it comes to inmates and what they're going through in prison, specifically in solitary confinement. Welcome, everybody. I'm Tom Zenner. This is Tom Zenner Scandal. I'm the co-host of 1 Degree of Scandalous with this man over here, the one and only Cato K-Train.
This is going to be a great show.
This is it. Buckle up, everybody, because we have 2 just VIP guests today that are going to break down everything that's going inside the prison and inside the mind of Kohberger. You ready to get this thing rolling?
Let's do it.
Dr. Kupers, great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us from Berkeley. You know, your experience is extensive in mental health for prisoners. This is what you spend, 3-4 decades on, all right? You have all the degrees. You teach at the Wright Institute right now. How do you interpret what Kohberger is doing right now? The complaining. He's constantly in the news, all right? This isn't made up. He's actually doing this. Do you think... Is this typical for someone that's now facing the reality of solitary confinement 23 hours a day? Or do you think this is strategic on his part and he's trying to get out of there, trying to get to another prison? Interested in what you think about what he's complaining about.
Well, I actually worry about the people who don't complain. Solitary confinement is torture. It is so stark and causes such severe mental damage that anybody in their right mind would complain. The problem is that it makes people not in the right mind. It causes mental illness. It exacerbates ongoing mental illness. It also causes a great number of symptoms, which make it hard for people to think straight. So someone who complains is actually showing signs of mental health in that context. We need to remember that he is an extraordinary he's guilty of an extraordinary crime, and therefore he's seen as a heinous villain. But solitary confinement is something that's used for over 140,000 people in the United States, not counting ICE detention. And ICE detention does a lot of solitary confinement. So it's not the case that only what's called, quote, worst of the worst, unquote, is in solitary confinement. Actually, most prisoners spend significant time in solitary confinement. It causes massive damage. And he's only the tip of the iceberg. That is, he's there and there's not a lot of public sympathy for him. Still, solitary confinement is very damaging, and we need to be worried about that.
Well, I think the argument has to be, though, that the prison's saying we're doing it for his safety, because I think if he's in the general population of the prison, my opinion is he's going to be killed. I think that the someone is just planning it. We saw it happen with Jeffrey Dahmer. I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I remember that case completely. There's probably planning going on. They're already shouting through the vents that they're going to go kill him. So don't you see that as the argument that they're doing it for his safety, not to be killed in prison?
Well, it's sort of a risk-benefit analysis. That is, there is a risk of great psychiatric damage and physical damage and brain changes in solitary confinement. And then on the benefit side, it's possible that there's a security benefit. But the way I look at that, first of all, he's really exceptional. He's way outside the usual prisoner biography. He needs special services that, instead of isolating him, he needs to be separated from people who he's in danger from. And that separation requires some creativity on the part of correctional authorities. He needs to get daily exercise. He needs to have social engagement, but he needs to be protected from others, and others need to be protected from him. And that can be done without solitary confinement.
Yep. Okay. So you can already tell this is going to be a great episode. And Cato, I had a conversation with Dr. Kupers yesterday because, look, I think you probably feel the same way as I do. I think most of our viewers do as well. There's no punishment bad enough for Kohberger in a lot of people's opinion. Like, I'm actively rooting that he's going through hell. And I'm sure this doesn't align with maybe Dr. Kupers' training, his methodology, and his, study, right? Which this probably isn't an ideal way for someone to be incarcerated, but tough shit. Right? You commit these types of crimes. So we're going to try to navigate this with Dr. Kupers today. Ultimate respect for you. And I really, really admire how you have to get past maybe some of your moral thinkings, or maybe something that would go, if you knew somebody that was killed so savagely, or if you knew these families, but you have to separate this. And we need people like you out there, right? Determining, is there a better way to do, and is it feasible? Is it even possible?
Tom brings up this point. You think of the families and what the families would want. And the families don't care about this guy. I think most of them probably want him to rot in prison. That's it. And like Tom says, you got to morally look at it. And how do you? I can't imagine if you're on social media or not, but people probably would hate you for having compassion for someone that viciously killed 4 young adults.
I think there's a fallacy here, and that is that this individual is exceptional. As I mentioned, there's over 140,000 people in solitary confinement. Or take the 200 and some immigrants who had not done any crime except for being undocumented and were sent to the prison in El Salvador, which is a known torture chamber. They're crowded, 70, 100 of them in a single space that's too small, doesn't have bathrooms. They get terrible food. All right. Is that the way we want to conduct criminal justice in the United States? It's not about a single individual who happens to have done heinous crimes. And yes, there's not a lot of compassion for him individually. However, he then becomes the wedge that allows torture to go on. And that's what's going on here. It's not about sympathy for him or lack of sympathy for him. It's about how do we want to do criminal justice in the United States. Personally, I believe torture is not okay, no matter how awful someone's crimes are. The United States should not be about torturing people. Second of all, it's not about him. It's about those 140,000 people in solitary confinement, and it's about the 200 that were sent to the CCOT prison in El Salvador. And that's what we need to think about while having this discussion.
Yeah, what a rude awakening. You get off the plane and you're in that prison in El Salvador, man. Crime doesn't pay. If they're criminals. I know Terry's mentioning that, some of them are just undocumented, but I mean, they try to save the worst of the worst for that prison in El Salvador.
And I look at the film, the people they show the prisoners in that El Salvador, the prison of them, all shaved heads, all tats. A lot of them do look like they're part of MS-13, but my goodness, it's like sardines just packed in a can.
Cato, I'm sure you looked at Dr. Kupers' biography and resume.
Yeah.
He really is the gold standard in prison mental health, board-certified psychiatrist, professor emeritus at the Wright Institute. His groundbreaking work on solitary confinement and inmate psychology has shaped national correctional policy. So he's got a voice that's heard at the highest levels. Let me ask you this, Dr. Kupers. Reality has to be setting in right now for Kohberger. Now, this guy is a sociopath. He thought he was going to get away with the perfect crime. I feel confident saying that because a lot of experts and people that are around him at the university and everything agree with me. What is it like when reality does kick in? And do you think he was thinking about this at all as he was planning these murders afterwards? And then we hear some of the recording or some of the research that's come out too that said he was scrambling once they identified his car and how he's trying to clean it. This wasn't something probably that anybody can be mentally prepared for. So do you think part of this is just reality setting in a very harsh way of what the next 40, 50, 60 years looks like for him if he survives?
Well, I don't think this is just anything. I think this is torture. And the question is, morally, do you think that if someone's crime is horrible enough, then they deserve to be tortured? And my answer is no. Torture is not okay. I can't comment about what's on his mind because I haven't examined him. And I'm barred as an ethical psychiatrist from commenting about someone's mental state who I have not personally examined. Mm-hmm. I haven't examined him, so I can't give you opinions about that. But what I can say is this. The main question is not what he's done in the past. He's in prison. He's been seen in court, convicted, and sent to prison. The question is, what's he going to be like in the future? And I can tell you with certainty that putting him in solitary confinement and keeping him there is going to make him less rule and law abiding and more violent in the future. Now, why would we want to do that? So, okay, he's committed a heinous crime. I have total sympathy for the survivors, the families of the people that died. However, do we want to make of him more of a monster than what he already was? And just in terms of policy, he then becomes the poster child for more solitary confinement, which makes more people subject to what I call the decimation of life skills. They lose the capacity to settle disputes peacefully in solitary confinement. That is a result of research. We know that. Now, why would we want to inflict that on people, even if they've previously, in the past, done terrible crimes? Why would we want to make them worse? It makes no sense.
Well, speaking of scandals that ruin lives, let's talk about something that hits a little bit closer to home: identity theft. Have you ever Googled your name or your email? I've done it recently, and the results, I got to tell you, were shocking. Blurred results from data brokers selling my personal information without my permission. I mean, it's creepy, right? I mean, these companies make millions off of our data. They feed it to scammers, marketers, and worse. And getting them to stop, it's a nightmare by design, and it's very, very confusing. And that's why this episode is sponsored by our good friends at Aura, the all-in-one digital security team that me, Cato, we recommend to our friends and family and use it ourselves. Aura handles the hard part. They automatically remove your info from those shady data broker sites and keep it off. Plus, you get alerts if your data pops up on the dark web, real-time fraud monitoring for your credit card and bank accounts, a secure VPN, antivirus, password manager, and more, all in one app. And if something goes wrong, 24/7 customer service around the clock with up to $5 million in identity theft insurance. That's why I use Aura. all this protection in one app, especially after all these crime stories that we cover here. I know it's out there. One app, every layer of protection. That is why I choose Aura. All right, stop leaving yourself vulnerable. Go to aura.com/Tom Zenner for a 14-day free trial. In those 2 weeks, you'll see exactly where your data is exposed and being sold. Trust me, once you sign up, you're not going to want to go back. Aura.com/Tom Zenner. Get the free 2-week trial and start protecting yourself right now.
Listen, I love Aura and all that. I keep saying to myself, who'd want Cato as identity theft? You got to prove it. You don't want another Cato. Trust me, one is enough. But honestly, you got to sign up for this free trial, everybody, because it really makes a difference. And nobody wants to go through identity theft.
Exactly.
Yeah. Terry was talking about Bryan Kohberger is a special case in prison. Is it because of his high intellect that he doesn't match the model prisoner? He's studying for his PhD. I would imagine a lot of the other people in prison didn't even get through college, or maybe it's my opinion that demographics show that some of them are not as educated. And this guy has got to be in the top 1% of someone in solitary confinement.
In terms of past educational achievements, yes. But actually, we should talk about who's in prison. There's this media blitz about heinous criminals, the worst of the worst in solitary. The actual truth is that most people in prison are poor. They grew up in low-income communities. There's a lot of trauma in their life. Disproportionately, people of color. There's 45% of prisoners are African American. Well, only 13% of the population is. That should make us think about racism in society and why so many people who are Black are ending up in prison. The other thing is that people they drop out of school and they got into trouble. I see them later on. Mainly what I do some criminal, trials as an expert witness, and I opine about sanity and competence, but that's a small part of my work. The main part of my work is civil litigation, where we talk about what standards there are for how you treat people in prison. And what I end up doing is talking to people in their 30s or 40s, and they will tell me this typical story. I was 14. I was, beaten, sexually abused, whatever, at home. I got into drugs. I got in with the wrong people. I committed crimes. It was stupid. I've regretted it ever since. They go to prison when they're in their late teens or early 20s. They've only finished the 9th or 10th grade in high school. They study. They grow up in prison. They become a mixture of people. They're ordinary people. Some of them are smart. Some of them aren't so smart, just like out here. Some of them are very kind. Some of them are mean. And it's basically a sampling like the population outside of prison. They're not all sociopaths. That's a myth. And what happens is they mature in prison so that the people I meet to interview when I'm looking at the conditions in prison are very smart. They can be at the level of a doctorate in college, but they haven't had the actual official education. I get into intelligent conversations with them, and I think I could be relating to them out here in the community. It's just that they, when they were 19 or 22, did a terrible crime, and they're spending their life in prison. They're not inhuman. They're human beings with a mixture of good and bad in their background.
Tom and I had a debate in one of our shows, and it's in the news now with the Menendez brothers being denied parole. And we had other guests on it saying they're going to get parole. Tom was on the leaning towards they'll definitely get a parole. So they have to go in front of a parole board, and everybody said that their behavior, even guards said it's incredible behavior. And then we find out that it's not incredible behavior. So, I mean, who do you believe?
Right.
So it's sort of
like they were had a cell phone. They were doing some low-level drug distribution.
And I want to know this. I want to know how does someone get something snuck into prison? How do you get gun? How do you get? I mean, not gun. How do you get drugs? How do you get a phone? I don't understand. How can someone get something where you're in prison? How does it happen?
Well, this is not my area of expertise, but But I will tell you some of what I've heard. First of all, when you go to visit prisoners, which I do frequently, I go in and I see many people at a time while I'm investigating to be an expert witness in a civil lawsuit. It takes me 20 minutes, a half an hour to get in through visiting. They search me thoroughly. They check my paperwork. And I'm on a legal visit. I'm a psychiatrist, but I'm going in as a consultant to a lawyer. Now you watch about 10 feet away, and the staff is entering, all of the custody officers and the other staff, the teachers. They usually carry lunch boxes. The officer at the desk asks them to open the lunch box. They open it just quickly and close it, and they walk through without going through a metal detector. All right, now the question is, how do drugs get into prison? Is it those visitors who are being searched and questioned and held at the front desk and examined? Or might it be some of the staff who are just let in and who would make a lot of money by bringing drugs?
I'll say it for you. It's the staff.
Do you know it's got to be the biggest nightmare right here is if someone sneaks in, the prisoner you're in prison and you sneak a cell phone in your anus and it's what I heard. And then it rings and then your cellmate, then the cellmate goes, I'll get that. It's got to be a bad thing. Tom, what am I saying on that?
Hey, doctor, I warned you. I warned you. This is Kato Kalin. You got to be ready for this stuff, okay?
That's got to be I'm just trying to I'm just trying to go through the whole of sneaking in. In LA, like I said, it's a big news story with Lyle and Eric.
It is. You know, and
I'm not bringing light to it, but you know what I'm saying.
But it helps to bring things a little bit of lightness to it. But to Dr. Cooper's point, you know, there's sophistication when it comes to some of these guards, right? They're working together, especially when there's gang affiliations inside. I mean, like here in Southern California, I mean, the gangs, they're very, very powerful inside these prisons.
Right.
As a matter of fact, I've heard stories where gang leaders make guys commit crime to get into the prison, to start, you know, working it on the interior, and then they have a supply chain where they can get stuff in and things like that. You know, when Kyle or Kato, remember when a couple of weeks ago when we had Chief Gary Jenkins, who was the chief of police in Pullman and also at Washington State University. I asked him, hey, do you ever think about what if Kohberger committed this crime at the Washington State campus? And this goes to Dr. Kupers here. If he had, he'd be in a different prison system. That'd be Washington. He's in Idaho. Do the states differ as far as their harshness, as far as what life is like in solitary confinement, and just how they're viewed in general by leadership in that state?
Absolutely. There is a movement today in corrections, and I'm not talking just about journalists and people who are critical of the prison system. I'm talking about commissioners of corrections in various states, wardens and such, are going to Norway to visit and see what they do with prisoners. They have a rehabilitation-centered program in Norway. And actually, the sentences in Norway are much shorter than the United States, and the recidivism rates are much lower. And in between those two things, between the crime and the recidivism, there is time in prison where prisoners are required to do rehabilitation, to have jobs. They're let out of the prison when they pass the security tests, and they work in the community in preparation for their release. Various states have sent representatives from high in their administration, including the commissioner or director, to Norway to study this system. North Dakota has set up a Norwegian system in the state. What they did is they enhanced rehabilitation programs. They do things like releasing people from solitary once they've proven with good behavior that they can get along outside. And then they give them a job as a mentor to someone who's still in solitary and needs to change their behavior to get out. They have jobs like that. They have more education. They do training so people will make it when they go straight. They'll succeed when they are released. And guess what? They've reduced the number of people in solitary confinement in North Dakota. And the violence rate in the entire prison system has gone down as a result. So there's one state. Washington happens to be sending people to Norway to look at their system. Oregon, Washington, Colorado, North Dakota, New York. And all of those states have enacted certain parts of the Norwegian rehabilitation strategy, and they've all seen good results of reduced violence in prison and reduced recidivism.
Okay, so on that topic, where does Idaho stand here? I take it they're no North Dakota, right?
That they're no North Dakota. I haven't actually followed Idaho specifically, but they're somewhere in the middle in the United States. There are harsher prison systems and easier. As you can imagine, Florida and Texas are very, very harsh prison systems. I think Idaho is closer to them than to North Dakota, but I don't actually know the details of the Idaho system itself.
Yeah, I find it hard to compare Norway to American prison system, only because I think the crime here is more intense with gang. I don't know Norway, but I can't imagine Norway having a subways where people are getting pushed in, or I can't imagine Norway having like a Chicago downtown, south side of Chicago kind of crime. Because once again, I don't know Norway, but I don't know if they're like a gangland and high violence people. So I can't see what their prison system would be like.
Well, all of these questions get more complicated when you go into details. Like you mentioned gangs. Gangs are a complicated and very varied phenomena. Some people are committed gangbangers for life, and they're into the drug trade and all that kind of thing. There are people like that. Some people join a gang for protection because they're afraid of being beaten, raped, robbed, and such when they're in prison. So they join the gang basically for protection in the prison. Now, when those people are given an opportunity, and certainly when they go free of prison, they're not any longer connected to gangs. They grow up, they get out of that kind of crime and that kind of culture. So there's a very mixed bunch of people involved in the crimes, in crime and in prison culture. So in prison, yes, and some states are more gang filled than others. And the gangs have a major effect, for instance, on the recreation yard. You always have to go, in American prisons, you have to go stand by the people of your own race. Because if trouble breaks out and you're among a different race, you're going to get beaten first and possibly worse.
Yeah. And I think that's why your point earlier was so good, because, you almost look at it like if he thinks it's bad in solitary confinement, if he was in general population, he'd be fighting for his life or nervous about his life probably 23 hours a day.
Is he allowed his parents to visit at all?
I don't know. I don't know.
Is that part of it?
I don't know when it's in solitary confinement. I mean, you can let us know. I don't know what kind of rights they have as far as visitation.
I don't know. Visiting is significantly reduced in solitary confinement. It's the duty of correction officers and correctional staff and administration to provide a safe place for people to do their court-ordered sentence. That is how the system works. There's a duty there. With someone like your guy, he needs special protection. He doesn't necessarily need protective custody, but some very smart custody officers and administrators need to be looking at his security issues and, for instance, moving him to a place where he's not in danger. Now, he's not the only person like that. There's lots of people. There's a huge stigma in prison against police officers, against child molesters.
Right.
Those people need to be protected. And so what prisons do, and they're very smart about this, the classification officers, they figure out a way to keep the people separate from those who might harm them. That needs to be done. I'm not going light on that.
Right.
However, you don't need isolation to do that.
Okay, and sometimes you start attaching the word special to these criminals, and it really, sets off, a reaction for people because they don't want them to have any special treatment.
Right.
I mean, these are the repercussions for what you did. Take a guy like Diddy. So, he's didn't get convicted on all these charges, so there's a chance he'll be coming out or have a light prison sentence. He's going to be sentenced here in the next couple months. But he's had to be isolated when he was in prison. And this is a guy that, has his own galaxy when he's out. I mean, he's a billionaire. I mean, he lives life differently. He has access to anything at any time, doesn't have any rules, essentially. So what kind of impact do you think a year in protective custody / solitary for him, is he going to come out a lot worse than he went in Do you think, I mean, what have you thought about Diddy at all? Because if he doesn't do 10, 20, 30 years, he's going to do a year. You know, it's going to be a year by the time he gets out of there. What would people around him expect his personality or some of, you know, the ramifications of how he was treated in prison and how he may have changed?
Well, custody officers and administrators have a lot of means to protect someone. So they can put people like they have special prisons in the federal system. They have low custody prisons where they put police officers who are convicted of federal crimes. Those police officers do not get hurt in prison. If they were released on a maximum security yard, general population yard, they would be hurt if anybody found out they were a police officer. Or a child molester, same thing. Now, I want to separate protective custody from solitary confinement. According to all standards, and this is the American Correctional Association, the National Commission on Correctional Health Care, the United Nations International Standards, protection should mean just that. You protect people from their enemies, but you do not deny them amenities or programs. They're entitled to the same amenities and programs as everyone else in their classification level. The fact is that by default, because our prisons are overcrowded and budgets are diminished, people who are on protective custody are put in solitary confinement. That is wrong. It violates all standards and should not happen. And when people who in that situation have sued, they've won their lawsuits and been released from solitary confinement. There is no need for solitary confinement when we're doing protection. Now, back to Diddy or any of the people you want to specifically talk about, there are programs that can be set up for them separate from the people who would attack them. And they can be kept safe, just like the police officer and the child offender.
I think two things will happen with Diddy. My opinion is that Diddy, first of all, you can't compare him to that only because I think prisoners want to meet a celebrity. I think it's kind of like the OJ thing too. People wanted to meet like OJ in prison, then they probably want to meet Diddy. But I think Diddy, if he gets out in a year or whatever, is going to be so thankful that he dodged the biggest bullet. And he's going to, I think, live a different type of life. A
normal
opinion.
person would do that, right?
Yeah,
thinking,
I would
holy
think
crap,
that.
I'm going to do anything I can to avoid going back there, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And is it like he's thinking to himself, is there anything else that's going to come out? Am I clear? Maybe he moves out of the country. Who knows?
Yeah.
But he dodged a bullet.
Hey, Dr. Kupers, you know, you've spent your career investigating this topic, talking to people that are involved in it, from prison officials to, you know, inmates, the whole thing. Say you had an hour with Kohberger, and, you know, there'd be some value that you'd get out of that hour where you could maybe help prevent other potential killers from doing, you know, what they think they might want to do or something. How would you approach that? What would you ask him? What would you try to get out of him? Because he's not a stupid person. He's educated, and he's, you know, for him to go through with what he did, you know, he's got some other issues that you're trained to handle. So what would your approach be? What would you try to learn?
Well, when I do this work, which I call forensic psychiatry, I base my work on what are called referral questions. That is, attorneys who are doing the legal procedure. It might be an insanity defense. It might be a competency evaluation. It might be a habeas corpus lawsuit, which is that the person is being punished in an unacceptable way, and that needs to change. They give me questions, and the questions are going to be, I'll do a psychiatric examination, a comprehensive psychiatric examination, and then I'll relate to the questions. For instance, they might say to me, and this is very mandatory for parole boards and compassionate release, if released or if sent to a lower level of security prison, would this person pose a severe risk of harm to others? So there's a referral question. When I spend time with an individual like him, I'm looking for the answer to that question. And I might just ask him the question, are you dangerous? If you went out on a maximum security yard, do you imagine there would be trouble? And he'd probably say, yeah, I think I'd be attacked. All right. So we have to deal with that issue. As a psychiatrist, there's a limited amount of help I can give the correction people about that. I can do risk assessment. For instance, people who have previously committed horrible crimes are more at risk for doing that again. Same is true of self-harm and suicide. And I can give opinions about that. But there's some very smart classification people in prison, and they know how to decide whether someone is safe or not. So that in a lot of instances where people are killed in prison, if I'm in some way asked to look into it, what I find is that those very smart people did not do their job, and they missed the risk that was blatant and obvious.
Kohberger probably would love to be interviewed with someone with such high intellect,
Well,
and probably Kel Berkeley
and get a
Dr.
little break
Kupers,
from
right?
solitary and go talk to an
getting a
intelligent
break,
individual.
get in his head.
Speaking of huge crime stories with people involved in them that have their last name start with K, what if you had a chance to interview this gentleman over here, Cato Kalin? Spend a little time with your psychiatric background.
Dr. Kupers, I got to say, I'm not allowed on couches because people think I might stay. I'm not allowed on couches, so I have to tell it up front right now.
Dr. Kupers, you could have a field day. This might take months of examination.
I think we'd be friends immediately.
I think we would have a delightful interview.
Oh, man.
I agree.
I think that you two keep making a mistake, if I can respectfully point this out. And that is, in order to investigate an issue that you're interested in talking about, you take the extreme case. The extreme case is not representative. So you've got someone who's committed horrible acts, including murder or rape or whatever. And you say, well, what about this guy? He's horrible. Well, the sensibility we all have is we agree this is horrible. We don't have any sympathy for this individual. But what I'm interested in is, how do we do criminal justice in the United States? Now, we have over 2 million people in prison or detention. They're not all murderers. In fact, most are not. Mm-hmm. Most are there for nonviolent crimes. And if we take the most heinous offender and then we generalize from that, we're going to have everybody locked up in solitary confinement. My research is about what would be wrong with that. So we've got 2 million people in solitary confinement. What's going to happen? We are going to breed disability and lack of compassion and lack of social skills to such a degree that everybody that gets out of prison will be dangerous. That is the opposite of what I believe criminal justice should be about. People commit crimes on average when they're young. They're in their teens or early 20s. All of the research shows the proclivity to commit crimes and violence goes down somewhere after the mid-20s. We have them in prison, punishing them for crimes they committed early in their life. Shouldn't we be trying to rehabilitate? And I'm talking about 2 million people. I'm not talking about the individuals you're.
And that's a very good point you make. It's a very good point. But Cato and I, this is an entertainment show, so we have to go with what the important stories are that people are interested. That's why we wanted to talk about Kohberger. I think it'd be a great another episode to talk to you about bigger picture, right? And even the financial commitment it would take to make these types of changes in the prison system, because the federal government, state governments have to be aligned on this and they have to make it a priority. But that's a time for another day. That's why we really want to get into Kohberger and just find out what kind of living hell he's going through in that Idaho prison right now.
Yeah, it's a great point. I'd like to find out if you're in touch with anybody that actually has been paroled that you've met before while in prison, and if you have contact with them now, if they're out of prison. I think that's just another story that I'm sure you do, right?
Well, see, I agree, and I have many people like that. I know many people who are formerly incarcerated, some of whom I helped be released by writing a fair psychiatric report for their parole board or compassionate release. I think you two are doing a disservice to journalism and to our culture by focusing on very high-profile extreme criminals. And here, let me explain what the disservice is. We are in the middle of a culture war right now. We have a president who is sending someone who has no criminal background, the man from Maryland, to South Sudan, where I guarantee you the conditions in prison do not meet standards for American prisons. They veer more towards torture. And in order to make the public accept the president's move to send him and a lot of other people who have not committed crimes and are undocumented, but they're not illegal because they have some green card or something. And the president wants to send them all to horrible torture chambers. The precondition for doing that is to get the public to think what the president told us. Immigrants from Mexico are rapists and murderers. Don't you agree? No, I don't agree. The research shows that the people coming in from Mexico are actually decent citizens who do work and support the American economy. That's the truth. Yeah. He wants to create a false scenario that we've got all these murderers and rapists invading. Now, when you singularly focus on extreme cases of people who have committed awful murders or sexual abuse, what you're doing is fostering his stigmatization of immigrants, for instance.
Well, okay, and I take that. I respect your opinion. Okay, now one thing we try to do is not turn this into a political show. Okay, we are a true crime show that we talk about the topics that people want to talk about. So I respect your opinion 100%, but we're not journalists. I'm not trying to be a journalist, so I don't ever want to take that responsibility of being a journalist. We have an entertainment, true crime, pop culture show. Now, I could combat that statement that you said. What about the woman from the Ukraine who just came to the United States and was just stabbed to death? I mean, we're both referring to things that fall through the cracks, right? We can't fix this whole issue with a debate, with an argument, and we can agree to have, different interpretations of things, and that's fine. But I think there's two sides to this. One isn't totally right, and the other one isn't totally wrong. There's ways to work together on different opinions and come to hopefully a conclusion that benefits everybody in the long term. So I respect your opinion, no problem, but we're not journalists. Cato, are you a journalist?
I was a paper boy. That's the closest I've been to a journalist. That's it. Delivering papers in Wisconsin in the winter. That's the closest to journalism.
But I hear you, and I respect that. And of course, what we want, we have to have safety first. What we want is when someone is a high risk of one crime or another, and we know that, we have to do something to protect the public. That is absolutely a given.
And I think we can all agree with that, for sure.
But then that has an effect back on how criminal justice is the policies and the practices occur. And I think we have to look at both of them. And all I'm saying is we should not take the extreme and unique case and then use that to justify one or another correctional approach.
Mm-hmm. And that makes sense. And you know what? You come at this from a totally different angle. 40 years in academics at the highest level. We're performers. We're content guys, right? We're agitators on some, at least I am, right? But an informed opinions. That is what I try to deliver. But hey, how about we continue this conversation some other time? I would love to. And you and I can really put a strategy together, some things that we can discuss, that I think would really benefit our audience as far as like to validate and honor the work that you've done, right? And then to figure out how some of it could be implemented and where changes could actually happen.
And by that time, when you do it again, we'll have so much more news will have happened with what you're talking about right now. And we'll know more about the story.
Yeah,
I think you're talking about Garcia yeah, we're gonna find out.
Sure.
In a month's time, how much is going to change from this moment from a month today.
And I got to tell you, Dr. Kupers, I appreciate you pushing back when you feel necessary. So good. Now, that's what I want our guests to bring, right? I don't want you to just thinking, hey, I got to, conform to something here. So I appreciate that. So I thought this was a great conversation, and really, really congratulations on a phenomenal career. Don't stop. You're doing so much good, right? And it was an honor to meet you, and thank you. I know our audience really appreciates you being on here and sharing this. And I think there's more ground to cover with you. I really do. So
yeah, a lot more.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate that. I appreciate your work, and I appreciate this is a very fair and honest conversation. Can I mention a book that I have?
Absolutely.
And we'll also put a
we'll
graphic.
Put it in the community notes. We'll pump this up. Tell us.
I have a new book. It's a collaboration. It's called Ending Isolation, The Case Against Solitary Confinement. It's by Pluto Press, and there are 4 authors. I'm one, but 2 of the authors are currently in prison, and 36 current prisoners have contributed stories that have gone into the book. So it's coming out right now. It can be ordered.
Oh, that's
online.
awesome.
Ending Isolation.
Okay.
And Amazon, you can go anywhere and
Amazon
Okay.
or any of the booksellers.
So we're going to put the link up. We're going to show a cover. If you can send me a cover, great. If not, I'll find it. We'll put it in the description for this episode. And I'll make you one promise. Next time we have a conversation on an episode, I'm going to have bought and read that book. Okay. Because I think it's a fascinating topic. I love how you have you guys co-wrote this thing. You have people on the inside that are living it and you guys that study it academically. So fantastic. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
great to meet you, Doctor.
Yeah.
I'll see you up
Great
in
to meet you.
Berkeley.
A great and fair discussion. I appreciate it.
You got it.
Really appreciate it. Thank you so much,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Kupers. All right. That's
Amazing
good.
show, yeah.
I love it. I like
It is fair and honest, and you know what? There was like you said, the pushback, but the pushback it's needed, and it you have an opinion, I have an opinion, Dr. Kupers has an opinion, and it's good that people can talk about this without, we see things on with the Real Time with Bill Maher or anything. They're both sides, and people end up hating sometimes.
Right. Yeah. You can't just, grind, dig in and not be.
Yeah.
This is how you can actually have real conversations. So I'm glad we were able to do that. And I think this is a good example of just have some respect. Not everybody's going to agree on everything, but I think we all, ultimately want the same outcome: safety for everybody involved. We're going to continue this conversation with another great guest. And Cato, I know you got excited when I told you who's going to join us. This is Paul Mauro, and we're going to bring him in. Now we can't show his face because he works for Fox as a contributor, and in his contract, really, Fox has #1 dibs on all video content with him. So we're going to put up a headshot of Paul, but we're not going to miss one bit of his incredible expertise and insight from working the streets of New York as one of the top law enforcement guys ever for 30 years.
So wait, can he see us? Because I have a great hair day.
Oh, yeah. Well, he gets the benefit of seeing. Hey, Paul, can you see Cato's hair? Yeah, can you believe is that a crime? Is that hair a misdemeanor or a felony?
No, it's a fact. I could see Cato's hair without this link, actually, from New York.
You know what? Yes, the space. They're doing SpaceX around my head right now. They're going to do it because
that's right. From the international station, it's going to bring Russia, America, and Ukraine together. We're all going.
If it's going to save the world,
you know what? Yeah, it's about time my gel could do that.
Hey, if anybody could do it, it's Cato Kalin, man.
I like that.
Peace and harmony. All right, I'm looking forward to the next part of the conversation because I think, Paul, you're probably aligned a little bit more with the way Cato and I think, maybe a lot of our audience as well. Kohberger in prison. You're doing a lot of great reporting on it. I saw one of the interviews you had a couple of weeks ago. You've segued so well into this media role. Congratulations. And we love OG cops, man. Tom Lang is one of our close friends. All the work he's done out here in LA. We love bringing on great cops. But let's talk about your perspective of what Kohberger is complaining about and what he's going through. Cato made a great point when we talked to Dr. Kupers that, hell, they might be saving his life by keeping him solitary. But do you think he's got it even worse in solitary than other inmates who have to endure the same thing? What are you hearing on the ground as far as what he's going through?
Well, I don't think that solitary is any harder on him than it is on anybody else. In fact, I would opine it's the reverse because he was such a solitary guy as it is. He was so internalized. He seemed to live in his own head so much. I'm not sure in prison and solitary his life is really going to change all that much from what it had been and what it was devolving to. I would agree that having him in solitary is probably saving him a lot of grief. Guys that are in jail for a long time, it's a rough prison he's in. And guys are in jail for a long time. Your currency is respect and notoriety. That's why you get serial killers who have been convicted on 4 homicides, 5 homicides, whatever it is. And then all of a sudden they start spouting off in Netflix specials or something that they actually killed 45. Because that's your status. Because you really don't have a whole lot else to live for other than this idea of I'm rising to the top of the criminal hierarchy. So to hit him, beat him up, torture him, potentially even kill him. Look at Whitey Bulger. That's the kind of thing that gains you status in prison. So they very well may be, in fact, saving his life. But one thing we do have to recognize is that it is very difficult to keep somebody quarantined away for a long, long time. And he's a relatively young man. He just hit 30. And that's expensive. Solitary is expensive. He gets 23 hours. He's under Supermax conditions. So 23 hours in the cell, an hour out. Somebody has to watch him. He has to be monitored. And then somebody has to walk with him, usually at least 2 guards when he gets his hour out. All of that's very resource intensive. They don't like it. And generally, unless it's Supermax, in a regular prison, eventually they cycle you into the GP, as they call it, general population. And that's when his troubles may really start.
So he's in there 23 hours. He gets 1 hour for exercise or whatever it is. Are those 23 hours of whatever he wants to do in his cell? Can he sleep for 13 hours? Or is there something always going on? Or is it just 23 hours by himself and monitored?
The latter. It's not like they set up camp activities for this guy. You're in there, you're staring at the walls. That's part of the punishment. Now, you do get, depending on the prison, and the warden is very reticent here, by the way, because they had those leaks. So it's very, very tough to get information right now. It'll cool down at some point. We'll get a little bit of a better picture of what he does all day. Right now, he seems to be doing sort of jailhouse lawyer thing. Let me learn all the rules. Let me see where I can complain, file complaints about the food, stuff like that. And, believe it or not, that kind of thing works in a case like his because it's very, very public. The warden doesn't want to be embarrassed. The authorities there don't want the grief. My understanding from a source is that there is a very fulsome investigation going on into how that video leaked of him in the cell.
Mm-hmm.
And so there'll be repercussions there. That's the kind of thing that embarrasses whoever's running the command. So they don't want that. So believe it or not, complaining about food and conditions will work for them for a while. All of this stuff's going to sunset when everybody goes back to their lives at some point. Everybody forgets his name. And as I said, that's likely when he's going to really start to have some trouble.
Yeah, in that video, you can see his hands were all red. He's got OCD. He's constantly washing his hands. But yeah, the fact that thing got leaked, people are pissed about that. All right, we had our other guest, he's coming from a totally different perspective than you. Academic, studies, classrooms, lectures, papers, right? You were on the streets.
I was a college professor for a while.
Well, yeah,
so
but
we're
you're
not
also
that far
cop,
apart.
right? So
I got over it. Yes,
so you have a different perspective.
Yeah.
Kohberger, it's so fascinating to try to get inside this guy's head because, he wanted to pull off the perfect murder. I mean, I think we can safely say that. He's never said it, but I mean, look, everybody around him has alluded to the fact that that was what he was trying to do. He failed. Okay. So what do you think's going through his head? A guy that thinks he's going to pull off the perfect murder. Is there any way they can rationalize or visualize how bad prison can be? Do you think maybe he thought, if I got caught, I can handle it? Or is it such a rude awakening for these people that are already delusional on some level, but also intelligent when they actually get inside that jail door slammed and they're on their own 23 hours a day?
Yeah, I think that, he is probably doing some rationalization here. He probably is telling himself that, what, if I had just not done that one little thing, I wouldn't have been caught. His level of arrogance, one of the things I did get from being out there so much interviewing the cops, I just did this interview with Fox Nation on, with the chief of police, rather, on Fox Nation, the streaming service, and he gave me a lot of stuff and other sources out there. And, they're just essentially saying his arrogance is palpable. It's what you see is what you get. He doesn't talk much. When he did talk to other people, he tended to be very, very condescending. He was always the smartest guy in the room. His responses were always a little bit off because he was very, very internalized. They weren't sure, is he hearing me? Is he not hearing me? So God only knows what he tells himself in jail. But he strikes me from what I hear as the kind of guy who's never going to quite admit that he was not as smart as he thought he was. And people who come up against police departments and investigatory agencies in general, can you get away with crime? Sure, a lot of people do. But that said, when the resources of the government and a real agency really sort of gather themselves, you are really, really going to need a lot of breaks to defeat it because institutionally, these agencies are very smart. You can say what you want about individual investigators, individual cops, but institutionally, almost every law enforcement agency in the country is either or has access to a sister agency that will help, reaching up to the state police or something. And once you're going up against that collective wisdom of investigations, people that do this stuff all day, every day, it's very, very tough to defeat them on their home turf. You're going into their home field to beat them. And they take it personally. They'll throw every resource they can. And I think this case is a good example of how when you really get across a law enforcement agency, Moscow is a very small PD. They got less than 30 guys. And yet, nonetheless, they pulled this thing off with good management, good investigation when they had very little to go on.
Okay, so having said that, do you think that I think it was maybe you, some story I did hear that possibly he forgot about the sheath. He realized he forgot the sheath, that he was going to drive back if he had enough time. That was something that was going through his mind. Do you think if he got that, do you think he commits the perfect crime? Or do you think the technology now with the pings and everything else that you guys know and I'm not privy to, do you think that's what screwed up the perfect crime for him? The
They would have
chief.
got him. Yeah, no, they would have got him without the DNA. And it's a good question. And it's the question that I put to the chief because it's the one everybody wants to know. Was that slight touch DNA really so dispositive? And I agree with the chief. I think they would have got there. Now the question becomes, would you have gotten a conviction? Which can be a very, very different thing. And I think they would have, because there would have been a big evidentiary fight. How much can you bring in about what's on point? Where then the judge would have sensed, look, we got to bring all of this evidence in. This guy's going to do it again. We got to take this guy out. And so when you start going into his online stuff, which again, he wasn't quite as good at it as he thought he was, you start to see the fact that he was looking to buy another knife. You're looking at the fact that he had been searching, even though he used a VPN. Some of these things are defeatable. They found all kinds of searches relative to serial killers, who's investigating the case when he realized that they were trying to look in the area for him. His searches the day before they rolled him up and collared him were, are psychopaths paranoid? Because he was trying to figure out, he knew he's a psychopath and he's trying to figure out, am I just being paranoid or am I starting to feel the heat? I wonder if they had actually spotted him. Chief would never have told me this and he hadn't gone out to Pennsylvania, but I actually wonder if he had spotted some surveillance because it was a difficult place to surveil. It was in a gated community and they had eyes on. My gut tells me they probably took over a neighbor's house or they had some cameras up or something, but he might have spotted something. And that's why he was asking himself, am I being paranoid? So ultimately, I do think they get there. The two campus cops in Pullman, Washington, who identified his car are unsung heroes in this thing. That's the node. I think that's the route that they would have got to him through ultimately, along with the phone pings and everything else. And in the car. And I think ultimately they put it together. And then when you really focus on the guy and start scraping at his life, it all starts to come together, even without that DNA. But ultimately, I think the other unsung hero here is Kaylee, because I think Kaylee fought him, and that's why the sheath was left at the scene.
Yeah, you said psychopath, and Tom, we've talked about this before. I think the video of him being pulled over by the Indiana state troopers, how calm he is. After you've got to be thinking, you see the sirens behind you, you got to be thinking, this guy, I'm caught. And he comes across as, oh, sorry, officer, I was, I didn't know, whatever it was, my tail lights out, whatever it is. But how he came across, you would just think another day for him.
Sure. And in fact, there were two car stops by two different agencies. And I got to say, Cato, I was very, very skeptical of that all along here. I know how task forces work. I was in one for almost 2 decades. And, feds and state, they don't always get along. Sometimes people do things independently. And I was always of the opinion that there was no way that was a coincidence and that somebody down the chain called a friend of a friend in the state police in Indiana and said, there's another guy, there's somebody else in that car, and we can't take the risk he's going to kill that person. We don't know who it is. Pull the car over, eyeball it, see if we can ID who it is. But it turns out, after talking to the chief, that in fact, and people say, oh, I don't believe in coincidences. It's a very cinematic line, right? It sounds very film noir. People like saying that on the air, but it's wrong. Coincidences happen all the time, and you end up chasing the wrong thing if you're doing an investigation. And this is a very good example. I was pretty sure that there's no way that could have been an accident, but the chief clarified they did not have Bryan Kohberger's name when he went mobile with his father across the country. Because I always said, how did they let him leave? If you really thought it was him, grab his garbage, match the DNA, grab the car, do a sneak and peek if you don't want to let him know, get a warrant on the car. How did they not do any of that? Well, it's there you go.
Yeah, and the December 19th was when the DNA on the knife sheath was identified. You wonder, you think FBI and Moscow police were working so in sync, and Idaho State Police, that maybe the FBI knew something and they could have given the heads up, pull this car over, let's see what's inside?
I don't. Like I said, I did think that, and there was reporting from another outlet. I won't say, I don't like to sort of pile on other outlets, but there was another outlet, and there's been some books written and stuff that claim that the FBI, in fact, were tailing him and lost him. Now, I can just tell you again, from having done a lot of investigations, it wouldn't have gone that way. If they had his name, they would have grabbed the garbage. They would have come up with a ruse. If they were going to lose him or thought they were going to lose him, they would have done some stuff with the car. You can do a lot of stuff with tracking these days, with phones, with cars. There's no way they're going to lose him on some cross-country trip. It's not happening. And in fact, they're not going to let him leave town. So, that never rang true to me, but it did explain why the two car stops occurred. And so I always had to sort of, be careful and hedge a little bit because I couldn't really explain that. But it turns out it was a massive coincidence. And as Cato, as you say, We got lucky because if I'm sitting where he is and there's two car stops and they're eyeballing me and then I don't get a summons in either one of them. See, that was what was so strange. They both pulled him out, pulled him over for the same thing. Two different agencies were closely following the car in front of him. And all of a sudden you got your second stop. Again, no summons, just a warning. You got to say to yourself, you're on to me. I'm him. I
Right.
drive right to O'Hare. I hug my father. I buy a one-way ticket to Brazil.
Right.
And that's the end of it.
I wonder if on the road trip they stopped at a Cracker Barrel.
Yeah, I
Well, they
don't
wanted
know.
to, but the logo had already changed. They couldn't find it.
They didn't realize
Where's
it,
that
Paul.
old man on the
Hey,
porch?
this isn't Cracker Barrel. This is just an updated Denny's.
Yeah. Hey, Paul.
Do you know the name of the man on the barrel? Let me see your
Heartbreak Hank or something? I don't know. It
No,
was
no,
something catchy.
I want to see your.
I read it. I
chops
saw it.
on this stuff.
Hillbilly Harry. I
Herschel.
can't remember.
Carl Cracker?
Herschel.
Herschel.
That's right. I knew it was
That's
with
the name of
an
this
I
guy.
knew it was with an
Herschel.
H.
Your pop culture chops are. I don't know.
They're
just
lagging.
flaming out.
We should have been another prompt for ChatGPT.
I never should have brought up that Cracker Barrel.
Hey, Paul,
joke.
you mentioned the Idaho prison that he's in is tough. I think people make the mistake of thinking, oh, Idaho, man, Boise, Coeur d'Alene. Are there really any hardened criminals there?
Exactly.
But dude, I mean, you've been there. We were going to go to Idaho if the trial happened. We didn't go. You've been there. What's that prison like? What are there some hardcore dudes in there making his life rough?
Oh yeah, there are. I mean, look, any prison can be rough, and it's a state prison, so it's everybody in Idaho. And my understanding is that they got some real gangs going there, and you're going to have potentially. In an area like that, you're going to have some of these far-right gangs, sort of neo-Nazi gangs. You're going to have Aryan Brotherhood, that kind of a gang. And you'll have a smattering of everything else. I'm sure there's going to be some of the Latin gangs, Hispanic gangs. Aryan Brotherhood is going to be a force there. But no matter what gang it is and what the power structure in the place is, just remember two things. Number one, the guards don't run a prison. That's the misconception that everybody has. The guards are there to keep the prisoners in. That's all they're really there for. The prisoners run the prison. And that's why the power structure and the hierarchy is such a battle in a prison, because that's all they got. And it's really left to them. And so that's bad news for him, because it's just ubiquitous across the prison population that a guy who takes out young women, and with the exception of a guy who takes out young kids, that's not a popular demographic inside prison.
It's interesting. The prisoners run the prison. It's not even the warden. It's the prisoners inside. It's their school that they're not allowed out of school, and they have everything inside that school, and it's run by the prisoners. That's somewhat of a scary thought that that's why a person has got to make a commitment to some group for protection. Am I right?
Yes, exactly. Think of it. Prisons are criminal justice condoms. Think of them that way. It's designed to keep them in there and nothing to get out. That's all there is to it. The warden wakes up every day saying, "How do I make sure I don't get an escape?" There's all the other stuff that happens, the administrative stuff. The parole hearings, taking people in and out. Yeah, all that crap happens. But the real thing for them to do is to keep everybody in. If nobody escapes, the warden's had a good day.
Yeah. The other rude awakening for him is going to be when people don't really talk about him anymore. You look at Luis Mangione, right, who's in the prison right now in Brooklyn, the same one as Diddy. People are going to start forgetting about these guys when they're not in the public eye all the time. How about Mangione? What's the word out there as far as like what kind of conditions he's facing? Is he in solitary, or has that died down?
My understanding is he's not in solitary. He's awaiting trial. So I don't remember. He was over here in, they closed MCC for a while here, which was the prison in Manhattan. They're renovating it. So all the federal prisons are over in Brooklyn. He's in federal prison, which is usually a little bit better, but it's the same facility that had Diddy, Ghislaine Maxwell. They were all in there at one point. There's Mangione and Ghislaine overlapped just a little bit, and then they shipped her out.
Right.
Diddy was in there. My understanding, last I heard anyway, they hadn't crossed paths. He did have a roommate, because at one point the roommate got out and gave an interview. I was reading the interview, and he actually seems to have adjusted pretty well. Like I said, it's federal prison. And again, especially after the Epstein thing, it's the same system. It's the federal system. You can't have a Mangione didn't kill himself episode. They can't have that again. So you can bet that he's well observed, surveilled. They're keeping an eye on him. He's got a prison job already, which is a perk. It's a perk to work in prison. They have him doing something in the kitchen or something, keep himself busy.
Yeah.
But so far, from my understanding, nobody has effed with him. Look, he shot a guy who, in some perverted areas of our culture, is it's justified in their minds.
It's amazing.
And it's not young women, and it's not a
Mhm.
kid. He doesn't have the vulnerabilities that that maybe Kohberger does have. But that said, he's a young, good-looking kid, and he goes in DG pop, general population at some point after a conviction. You're gonna have another series of problems.
Yeah.
He might need that condom.
That's right. That's right. He's going to have some
But
romantic,
and the thing is, Tom,
romantic drama.
yeah, Paul. But the other thing is too that this guy shot a guy. It's horrible. It's all on video, and the person he shot his kids, and it's just I don't understand how anybody can take the side of a killer. It's on video. How can you have compassion for
Yeah,
that
but
person?
I mean, the way some of the generation thinks, though, he's the villain, the guy that was killed.
Like I said,
Yeah.
is it certain media that makes certain people a villain, or is it? I mean, or actually makes them the hero? Certain, the way that the media is divided.
They buy into the most facile narratives, and the narrative here is because he worked for an insurance company and he was at an executive level that he must have deserved it. And the way I think about these things is I say to myself, okay, all of the millennials and Gen Z characters who are advocating for this being a good move, well, every damn one of them would be happy if they had a father who had that same executive job, taking down seven figures, and had them on a $300,000 a year allowance, let's say, essentially a similar lifestyle to what Mangione had, because Mangione came up with money and never seems to have had a real job in his life. They'd all be happy to take that money and look
Yes.
the other way and never complain about the fact that their father was an insurance executive. So it's all very situational and convenient. And I think it's one of the things that makes Mangione's actions, allegedly, because he's not convicted yet, but it makes his alleged actions so venal and revolting.
It's like Kamala Harris' stepdaughter, who's all broken up over climate change. These people are so delusional. They have no sense of reality. They have no sense of gratitude. They just think they're constant victims. They just have a warped mentality. One thing I'm worried about is if your socialist, communist mayor candidate actually wins in New York City. What is it? NYPD, your buddy's still on the force, at the highest levels there. How worried about what's going to happen to crime if this guy actually wins? And are you worried that he could win this? I mean, it looks like he could. Could something happen here and save the day?
Something could happen. The Zoronistas here, as we call them, Zoro Mandani supporters, are very, very energized because New York is expensive. And we're coming off of 12 years of horrific mismanagement here in town. We had 8 years of Bill de Blasio as the mayor, who was like left of Karl Marx. And then we had Eric Adams, who is really just, I'm sorry, an incompetent. We were hoping, as a former cop and somebody who said a lot of the right things, we all gave him a chance, and he just surrounded himself with people who were begging to be indicted, and in fact, many of them have been, and that's why he's polling even behind the Republican in a very heavy blue town. He's polling behind Curtis Sliwa, who I think actually, now that he's assembling his team, would be a good mayor. But that said, I do think that Mamdani is defeatable. What he got in the Democratic primary is the ceiling. He's never going to get any more votes than that. And he got about 450, 500 final count. Generally, that's not quite enough. That's not what you win with in New York. Problem is, it's splitting of the vote. It's right now a thunderdome of egos. You got Sliwa, you got Cuomo, and you got, as I said, the incumbent Adams. None of them want to drop out. All of them think they have a path to victory. Consequently, they split the vote, and then we get Mamdani. And all you have to do is look at Chicago, the mismanagement going on under that guy, Johnson. You see all kinds of major businesses decamping, Citadel, Tyson Foods, Boeing, that employ thousands of people, damaging the tax base. And Johnson's even been forced to admit that, Chicago has reached a point of no return. I don't know what that means. Are they going to declare bankruptcy? But New York could easily go down the same path. And it's just so infuriating as you get to a certain age. I lived through this in the 70s and the 80s. New York in the 70s had to go bankrupt because they had to lay off cops. It had never happened before because of the same hyper left nonsense. And everybody leaves. If you can leave, you leave. And here's the problem, just to close the loop. New York has always been about money. Cities are about things. Washington's about government. New York's about money. LA's about Hollywood. New York's money doesn't have to be here anymore because the stock market, the Wall Street characters. I know guys who run Wall Street hedge funds now from the side of a mountain in Vermont. You can run a hedge fund now from the International Space Station because of the internet. The savior is no longer here. What is left to New York is the lifestyle, the culture, etc. And when the city looks like hell and nobody wants to come here and you've lost that, well, then why come? And that's why everybody's going to Texas, Florida, the Carolinas, etc.
I've said this, Tom, many, many times before, as I always will with the homelessness here, that I was driving on the 10 freeway in Los Angeles where there was a sign that said, if you lived here, you'd be homeless by now. So it's everywhere.
He's on fire today, Paul.
But it is like that, Paul. And I've lived here now. I'm from Wisconsin, but coming here for over 40 years now, I've just seen the decline. And it's horrific. It's horrific what is going on in Los Angeles alone.
Yeah, we have a case study here. It's called Karen Bass, and it's bad because
the B is silent.
Yeah, because they don't give a damn about the people that live in this city. They care about themselves. That's it. And as soon as people wake up, as soon as intelligent people wake up and realize how much they don't care about you, not only do they not care, they don't even look at you as a human in some regards. You're just
I think we're finding out. I think with more and more we're finding about Newsom and his wife. We're going to find out exactly where the $100 million went for the fire. We're going to find out if there's cheating that's been going on and taking money. So investigations, as you probably know, Paul, from being a contributor in Fox and seeing you outnumbered everywhere, something I think is going to happen to Newsom, and it's not going to be good.
I hadn't really chased that down. I will tell you this: the ecosystem on the left of funding is such a complex web. It's just this arabesque spider web that is so incomprehensible that even experienced financial investigators despair of it and throw their hands up. And it's not because there's a mastermind. We should be clear on that. Rush Limbaugh used to make this point. He used to say, they don't have to be told. Don't go looking for an email from DNC Central that sets it all up. They know what to do. They're all operating off the same sheet of music. And so they all know what to do to further the leftist cause, the hyper-progressive cause. And what it has led to is a series of interlocking NGOs, super PACs, not-for-profits, charities, all of which are blurred. There are 501c3s or 501c4s, which allows you to make the contributions. They donate to each other. The money comes back with the exact same amount 10 minutes later, but it's washed. It's all money laundering. And it's starting to finally catch the attention of some of the right. It's like I said, it's not sexy, and which is unfortunate because the non-sexy stuff is where they beat us. They beat us in that area with the funding and the way they move money, because a lot of it's government money. All right. Look at the nonsense that just went on at the EPA with billions going to things that are stewarded by somebody like Stacey Abrams, who I wouldn't trust to run a falafel stand. And we just find out now that there's several other billions going out to Biden cronies that they finally just put a stop on in the foreign policy world. And it's just for them to take care of their buddies. The other area that they beat us in is the back deal legislation. The way they got a hold of New York is they saw their opportunity after the Floyd incident in the summer of love of 2020. And they get down into the nitty gritty, and it's the gerrymandering. It's the local legislation stuff that allows them to gain hold of the states, of the state legislatures, of the governorships, and then ultimately the House of Representatives. The right has been very slow to twig to all of this because it happens under the radar. And as I said, it's not sexy. You need the guys in the suits. You need the bean counters with their abacuses and slide rules to keep an eye on this crap, because this is where we lose and it's where we beat them. I hate to say this, but what the right needs is more lawyers.
Yeah. Well, we're waking up, and that's a good thing. Hey, this has been great.
And by the way, everything I said was allegedly of what's going on. Because
sure.
There's investigations going on.
Yeah. So hey, Paul, we'd love to have you on again. I mean, this is great. We handle all the big crimes, but man, you're doing a great job. And I just love to tap into more of your backstories and some of the crimes you covered, because I'm just fascinated about it, especially in New York.
Talking to Paul, I feel like I'm in New York right now.
Yeah. Keep up the great work.
Are you guys going to CrimeCon?
No, we were thinking about it. I was trying to get Cato as a speaker. I got to get him as a speaker next year.
I'm going to speak next week up in Carmel. I'm a detective association and police. I can't wait. And it's going to be really exciting. I'm going to try to get a whole speaking engagement going on, and just a strength of
Supposed to be a
Q&A.
nice, beautiful.
Crime-
Isn't that the one? What? Clint Eastwood was there.
Yeah,
right?
he was the mayor.
Wasn't Clint Eastwood the mayor over there? Yeah.
Yep. Tom, and CrimeCon is in Nashville, correct?
No, it's in Denver.
Oh,
it's in Denver this year. Yeah. So if you head out to LA, give us a call. We'll just tell our viewers, what you look like outside your headshot. All right. Got the good look right here in the den. Right, all they're seeing is your headshot right now.
I'm in a. This is a closet. I got so many books. I put them in my closet. My wife,
I love that. And
wife
Paul,
threw them in here.
read your contract and see if that we can actually get you on camera.
Yes, I'm gonna put my lawyer hat on, and
man.
we're gonna do that.
You said we need
You
more
look great.
lawyers. Let's
You
get
look-
some more lawyers.
You look great.
Hey, Paul, thanks so much, man. We'll talk to you again in the future for sure. Okay.
Say hi to Emily.
This was fun, guys.
Say hi to Emily
Yes,
and the
I
whole
will
crew
do.
because I did her show. Okay.
All right. Appreciate it.
A pleasure.
You got it.
Bye now.
Thank you.
All right. So
Bye.
fantastic.
What a show.
Yeah, that's a great show. We covered all angles today.
Don't turn off computer.
Yeah.
Right? Paul, no.
We'll remind him. It's no big deal.
Don't turn off your computer, Paul.
Yeah. Hey, by the way, starting this membership, you're seeing the announcements on social media. You're seeing it on a community page. This thing is launched. We got 3 levels. Cato, I put 3 levels together. Our highest level is going to be insane. How would you like to jump on a Zoom call or a Riverside with me and Cato after a show where we break it down, right? You can ask us questions that we're going to look at the 3 levels of our membership because they're great. Something for everybody. And, with that type of support, we're going to be able to keep doing shows like this twice a week.
Yes.
Twice a week.
I'll do it. I want to see a Zoom right after the show with us, talking to
Yeah.
someone.
Do you have any idea how much his hair gel costs? I mean,
Yeah.
that's a freaking big line item expense.
Yeah, I don't know when this show's going to go up or not. I don't know the date of this going up. But if you want to see me, if folks want to actually come out and meet me, I'll be at the huge Burbank autograph show, September 5th and 6th.
Okay. This is going to definitely drop before then, but write it down in your calendar, September 5th and 6th in Burbank. Where?
At the Burbank Airport Marriott.
Okay.
And it's incredible amount of, I get celebs that'll be there. And it's going to be so much fun. I'm just reading it. And they picked me to be on Fox, Paul, Fox to do a whole segment of sit-down interview of who's going to be there and all that September 1st. So
Amazing. Hey, bring in more information, some of the other names. We'll keep promoting this because we'll have a couple more episodes before that. September 5th and 6th. Go see the K-Train.
Connolly and Dylan. They don't know me there. It's going to be kind of exciting from Entourage.
Are they going to be there?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, great. Excuse me. Okay, excellent episode. 2 great guests, great topic. Kohberger, sorry, bro. I know it's a little rough for you, but I don't have any sympathy for you, man. None.
Great show. And Dr. Kupers, I love that we have the understanding, understanding, but we could come to peace, and hopefully he does our show again.
Yep. Okay, so fill up the comments, follow Cato and me on social media. Check out our memberships. We're launching them. Sign up for Aura. It's worth it.
Oh, yeah.
For the one and only Cato K-Train, Kaylin, I'm Tom Zenner, and we will see you very, very soon.